So a new season is here in Hearthstone, and I know what that means. You want some nice decks to climb, and that's what I got in this video. A ton of different decks for you to choose your favorite deck for the month that's going to help you succeed and maybe climb higher than ever before on the Hearthstone ranked ladder.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
That's right, I got 6 decks here across various archetypes and play styles to help you pick the deck that's really right for you this month. To source these decks, I picked the highest win rate versions in various categories based on the last 3 days of data with more than 1,000 game sample size from Diamond to Legend in all regions across HS Replay. The best deck meeting those criteria right now is still Tempo Demon Hunter. This has the highest win rate, this individual list, in fact. And it's really not too crazy different than what we've seen since the expansion launch for Tempo Demon Hunter. It has moved back into that Priestess of Fury mid-game with the Raging Fell Screamers to give it a little bit of extra depth. Still rocking power cards like Kane, Altruist, and Metamorphosis to give it that reach and lethal potential. Crazy fast starts despite the nerf to things like Battle Fiend. Still makes the cut. A great one-drop package moving into some pretty powerful mid-game plays off of various weapons. Satyr Overseer. I think Warglaze of Azzanoth is just an insanely strong card that carries this deck in many cases. Only running 1 Gleifbound Adept, but nonetheless, another powerful tool to get you some damage. And of course, Skull of Gul'dan, just tying it all together for those really big recoveries in the mid-game, particularly in combination with Altruist the Outcast. So when you're playing this deck, you basically just want to play fast. The only time you really want to hold back resources or damage is if you think you can utilize those to expose some kind of extra synergy. You know, maybe setting up for that big Altruist turn, saving some pressure for a big Kane push. So other than that, just play it quick, play it fast, draw tons of cards, create lots of pressure against your opponent, and build out those outs for crazy damage off of Metamorphosis and Kane, and you should absolutely cruise up the ladder with this deck. So speaking of quick climbs, this deck is actually the fast climb deck, which means the game time is shorter than anything else while still maintaining a really solid win rate. It's Face Hunter, of course, the staple fast climb deck, but still a really competitive list. I mean, in some cases, Tempo Demon Hunter could still be faster, although the game length is longer. You win a lot. You'll still win a lot with this deck. So if you only have maybe like 5 minutes on a train ride in the bathroom, this could be the choice for you. This is a Face Hunter list in particular that is for some reason all out of order. I don't know why, but it's too late for me to fix that. But this is not a Stone Tusk Boar shenanigan version. This is more of the consistent package. It still has Scavenger's Ingenuity, but that's just to give you those really big phase stalkers on occasion. Of course, also running the Leper Gnome package here, alongside cards like Pack Tactics, Toxic Reinforcements, Eaglehorn Bow. It's just like a traditional Face Hunter with a handful of new cards, like a single Pack Tactics to empower that Phase Stalker, Explosive Traps. Otherwise, really crazy cheap spells like Arcane Shot to help you keep up with Demon Hunters, and, you know, just kill commands and Dragonbane to create even more pressure. So it's as simple as it gets. Literally just go face, drop the minions on curve, play everything as fast as you can, and just go to town. You'll just hit buttons and smack your face across the keyboard, and you'll win a lot of games with this deck, and you'll do it very, very quickly. So moving on now to the opposite side of things here, we've got a control deck. Now, this is where a lot of you might thrive if you hate face decks. A little bit slower paced, a little bit more calculating in its style. And the highest win rate control deck right now is GALAKROND Priest. Now, I have a little bit of trouble calling some things control decks these days. A lot of these decks still have a ton of initiative they can create. This deck included can make a lot of minions and still create pressure on board, but it has a lot of control tools nonetheless. So a ton of big removal spells. Not only like the Plague of Deaths and the Soul Mirrors at the end, but you've also got Shadow Word Deaths and Penances and Breath of the Infinites and Holy Novas throughout the course of the game to help you really keep your opponents in check and in control. So even though this does have that minion generation, still very much feels like a control deck. It's going to give you great answers to Tempo Demon Hunter with those 2 damage AoEs, where a lot of Demon Hunter stuff lines up at exactly 2 health these days. You can also just outvalue a ton of decks on the back of GALAKROND, generating you lots of resources. Still got some flexibility because a lot of cheap tools, a lot of discover effects, a lot of random generation. I really actually like playing this kind of Priest, unlike things like Res Priest, which to me don't feel as fun to play. They're much more simple and straightforward. Just drop the taunt, drop the taunt, drop the taunt, cast a spell. This one you have a lot of choices and flexibility, so it can be a little bit more intimidating to play, but the main goal here is to keep things in check until you can shift into a counter pressure standpoint late game where you're developing your own threats, making lots of extra minions, and eventually just overwhelming your opponent with stuff. So a very successful priest deck right now. Great control play style. If that's your jam, I think you'll like this deck. Moving on here to our OTK deck recommendation. Now, I do want to issue a bit of a disclaimer here. There isn't really a high-tier OTK deck right now in Hearthstone. OTK Demon Hunter is the highest tier, I would say, OTK deck, but it does not have a fantastic win rate. To be honest, you might lose more games than you win at high levels of competition. If you're a very skilled player and you want to climb early in the season with this deck, I'm sure you'll be able to scrape together a win streak and move up some ranks. But you might have to phase out of this one later on in the month unless you just love playing OTK and you want to stick with it. But it turns out, the nerf to Kael'thas and the shifting meta really pushed OTK Demon Hunter down when even at the very beginning of the expansion, it wasn't the best version of Demon Hunter, but it's even lost some ground since then. Now, of course, the game plan with this one is like all OTK decks, you're going to want to control all of your opponent's stuff, keep them stamped out, and then eventually set up for a really big turn where you kill them in one shot, which means playing off of something like Kael'thas Sunstrider to play multiple zero-cost inner demons to get up to like 16 damage, in combination with perhaps some Twin Slices, Chaos Strikes, etc., to punch through for a lot all at once. You can use Kain Sunfury to do that even through taunts. You can create breakpoints with cards like Metamorphosis. So all in all, it can beat almost anything that doesn't have a ton of armor, but it can't do it that consistently because sometimes your opponents just overwhelm you with pressure and you can't keep up, or you have to start using AoE setup cards to maintain the board instead of actually winning. And it can just find those lose conditions on occasion, or frankly, rather consistently, and doesn't quite get there. So a fun deck, a cool deck, certainly a viable enough deck to climb. A pro player could easily take this to Legend. But if you're an average player who's perhaps looking for something reliable, you might want to pass on this one for now, but still a fun choice. And if you just love OTK, I think this is your best bet. Moving on here to my sleeper deck recommendation. This is a deck that's got a really solid win rate, but has a very, very low popularity. There are a handful of those. In this particular instance, I filtered to decks with just around a 1% played rate, so very rarely seen on the ladder, but nonetheless really strong. This one's a GALAKROND Evolve Shaman, which basically combines GALAKROND package with some of the new Evolve package cards like Bogspine Knuckles, Bogstraw Clacker. I revealed those bad boys. Shout out my card reveals. And then, of course, enablers for those things like Desert Hare and Mogu Flesh Shaper, which can make great evolve targets. And frankly, even Corrupt Elementalist is a really cool evolve target in this list as well that sort of fuses GALAKROND and Evolve together. But essentially, this gives you two sort of game plans in this deck. You can build a lot of initiative and pressure off of that evolve package, playing minions, overwhelming your opponent with stuff and dudes on board that get incrementally larger over the course of the game, occasionally spiking that power level via Mogu Flesh Shaper. If that doesn't work, then of course you can shift into the sort of GALAKROND mode instead, keeping their early pressure in check, in particular against Demon Hunter. All of the 2-1 rush elementals can be great to take early trades, and then eventually just shift into a big board late game that often creates enough kind of one push counter pressure to kill your opponent. So all in all, a really cool deck that's, I think, a pretty consistent play, but it still has that randomness of evolve that's really fun and chaotic and create great storylines, great moments. So consistent in its curve and game plan because of GALAKROND, but also really fun and has some high roll opportunities, which can be really, really enjoyable too. So, and plus nobody's playing Shaman, so it is a true sleeper. You can catch people off guard. They don't always know exactly what to expect. That alone can give you a pretty big advantage on ladder. So a really cool deck to check out, I think. And then finally here, going over to our budget list, it's unfortunately another Tempo Demon Hunter. And the reason for that is Demon Hunter's really the king of budget decks right now because all of these cards, not literally all, but most of them were free. Everybody just got a ton of free cards. And when you can build a really good Tempo Demon Hunter list with only a handful of actual cards from Ashes of Outland, but the rest being from the Initiate set for Demon Hunter or the basic set, that means you don't have to spend hardly any dust to get a really competitive list. Now, this isn't going to be as good as the full version of Tempo Demon Hunter that runs things like Kain and Metamorphosis as extra legendaries, but it's still going to win a lot of games. It's still going to climb very consistently, and I would make a a guess based on the win rate that it's still actually legend viable as well. I think you could probably play this all the way to legend because a lot of the key stuff you're looking for is still in this list. So it's exactly like our previous tip of Demon Hunter, right? It just doesn't have quite as many of those like over the top outs. So you might have to play for a little bit more board consistency and board pressure instead of like creating those crazy kill scenarios where you just send a ton of damage to the face. So be a little bit more board centric perhaps, but otherwise just play it fast, play out cards, go face when you can, create pressure, and overwhelm your opponents. And this is a really good budget deck, which is not that common in Hearthstone these days. So if you're looking to get some big ranks without a big dust commitment, I think this is a really, really good choice for it. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for our deck recommendations for the month of May here in 2020. Some really cool stuff to climb with. Frankly, a lot of decks are viable right now. So if you don't like these, just go check out a site like HS Repay out of card somewhere and find another deck that you like, because you can win with a lot of stuff right now. But these are the highest win rate versions in that selected criteria that I've been able to identify over the last 3 days. So for right now, these seem like great choices. You probably can't go wrong. If you have a deck that's working for you, you want to share, put that down in the comments below. I'd love to see it. Tons of people watching would like to see it as well. But until then, thank you, and until next time, game on. Well, it's a new season, and I know what that means. It means you guys want some deck picks. You want big decks, small decks, fat decks, skinny decks. You want it all, and that's what I got in this video. Tons and tons of deck picks.